Good evening, everyone. This is Sarah. And week 7, Dr. Meredith asks the question, what would it look like if Jimmy Carter had been reelected? Would we have seen continuity in his administration, or would we have seen change? Factors that were influenced: the domestic interests of the U.S. foreign interests in the Middle East between Israel, Egypt, and Palestine, as well as the growing strength that supports the Soviets. In answer to this question, again, this isn't simple. It's multi-directional. There's always a lot going on in the world. And here goes the answer. As President Carter felt things were falling apart in the Middle East, Carter knew he needed a policy and acted quickly, even if it meant the cost of domestic politics in America. Israel was not set on the re-election of Carter because Carter wasn't set on unequal treatment between the West Bank and Gaza. So Begin believed the United States should help Israel because only Israel stood in the path of the Soviet takeover of the Middle East. And as far as foreign policy was concerned, Carter would have needed to ensure the autonomy of the Palestinians in order to secure support from the West Bank and Gaza. So his policies towards the Cold War would have helped adverse effects in America because Carter's diplomatic policy was weak. He was a typical Democrat with a focus point on negotiation persuasion through political maneuvering. And the Japanese auto industry was beginning to outperform the American auto industry, which had a negative effect on the steel industry here in America. And not to mention, OPEC decides to decrease production and increase prices on crude oil, and the people in America were concerned and did not want continuity because America was on a downward spiral domestically, and internationally peace was at a standstill, and there was a quasi-war in Korea as well. So communist uprising in South America, Nicaragua, and the final nail in the coffin was the Iran hostage crisis. So Carter would have negotiated around the international political spectrum for the next 4 years, and that would have lowered America's capabilities and powered production, which taking more time to find global solutions and domestic reforms. Now, this may have all been accomplished in the Carter administration had he would have been re-elected in the next 4 years, but at what expense? So in the second part to this, just to add on to what was going on, so the government cannot fix the economy, but it can stimulate the economy. And whereas Democrats believe they can fix it, well, we all know, as we've seen in history, that this just isn't the case. And Reagan had stimulated the economy in the most ingenious way by having an arms race. He built up the military and technology and manpower of the military, and this was important because America was competing with Russia at the war of attrition. And Reagan knew that the Soviet the Soviet Union had no incentive or free market, so there was no personal benefit aside from citizens fearing life and limb if not complying because it was a communist nation. So knowing this, Reagan knew that the Soviet Union would eventually collapse and the system would fall apart from within. In a free market society, in comparison, they had infrastructure, and that's reason and incentive and capital, economic gain and wealth, even if it's self-motivated and this self-interest. It's still better than do this or we'll kill you mentality in communism. So there was incentive, and that was important. And by having this arms race between Russia and Reagan and the USSR, and this set the foundation for two things. One, it set a firm stance in the Cold War against the communist expansion, and Reagan was sure to implement that and say, yes, this is exactly what it is. And secondly, he created the incentive that stimulated the economy and new infrastructure and new technological weapons and systems and companies and corporations and businesses, which stimulated the creation and growth of jobs. So, thus being said, had Carter would have been in office for the next 4 years, at what expense? Do you think any of this would have been possible? And I hope this answers the question, and I hope to hear from you and your responses. Thanks.